First of all, a small clarification. I'm going to be performing Louis Couperin's Tombeau de Monsieur de Blancrocher on the harpsichord in quarter comma meantone temperament. Right now I am here sitting in front of the spinet simply because I want to demonstrate something relating to quarter comma meantone, and the harpsichord is already tuned to something else simply because I'm working on different projects at the same time, and the spinet is still in quarter comma meantone. So this is the only reason I'm going to be demonstrating on this instrument. So Louis Couperin is certainly not the only composer to have written a tombeau for Monsieur de Blancrocher. There is another, probably better known tombeau for harpsichord by Johann Jakob Froberger, and there are also two tombeaux for lute written by François Dufaux and Denis Gautier. Clearly, Monsieur de Blancrocher was an important figure in the musical world of his time. His full name was Charles Fleury, Sieur de Blancrocher. He was born around 1605 and died in November of 1652. He was a lutenist active in Paris, but sadly only one of his compositions seems to have survived. So basically the only reason we are aware of him nowadays is due to the four tombeaux written for him after his sudden death. Blancrocher's death was certainly unusual as well as unexpected. He died by falling down a flight of stairs, apparently in the presence of Froberger, whose tombeau concludes with a dramatic musical representation of this fall through a rapid descending scalar passage. Louis Couperin structures his tombeau like a pavane. That is, the work consists of 3 sections, each of which is repeated. Like Froberger, Couperin also depicts musically Blancrocher's fall, but I think that before we discuss that moment, we need to address a different dimension of providing expression in a piece of music, which has to do with the use of temperament. I think that Couperin's Tombeau is an eloquent example of how composers in the 17th century used quarter comma meantone temperament for expressive purposes. The tombeau is in the key of F major, which is perfectly playable in meantone, and a modern listener may very well be a little surprised that Couperin has chosen a major key, which nowadays we consider happy, for a tombeau. Now, obviously, Couperin doesn't necessarily have to remain in a major key throughout, and indeed he doesn't, but I still think that the main dramatic force in this piece has to do with those carefully planned moments where Couperin will employ chords that, due to the characteristics of quarter comma meantone, some of which we may nowadays erroneously regard as limitations based on our own aesthetic priorities, will produce unsettling or jarring harmonies that enhance and amplify the expressive content of the piece. Let me demonstrate what I mean by looking at how Couperin depicts Blancrocher's fall, or perhaps even more accurately, what happens immediately after the fall. Before we start, let me say that unlike Froberger, Couperin does not depict the fall at the end of the piece, but rather in the second of 3 sections. And at the moment where, at least I think, he is portraying it, he is instructing the performer to play faster, although he never tells you where to stop playing faster and return back to the original tempo. So what I have decided to do, and this is also what other performers are doing, the idea is when you get to that point is to start gradually accelerating, and then when you get to the end of that section, to the end of the fall itself, that's where we go back to the original tempo. And of course, every performer has a different way of doing this, and also perhaps a different impression of where this fall ends. So let me show you now what is happening and how Couperin is using quarter comma mean tone for expressive purposes. Now I'm going to look at the whole section. So we're starting at the beginning of the second section before the fall itself happens, and immediately Couperin is going to play a little bit with the fact that in mean tone half steps are not equidistant at all. So we're going to get an opposition between a B flat followed almost immediately by a B natural, and that's where we get our first spice in this section. So so that was the first spice. Now here is where the fall starts, and we should accelerate. I'm not going to do it very dramatically because I want you to have time to process what's happening. So here's the actual fall now, and notice that we have a particular idea that keeps being repeated. Now we continue. And I slowed down a lot there to show you what is happening. This is where I think he has fallen off the stairs. He has fallen down the stairs and gone all the way to the bottom. Because if we have this kind of idea, we get this dissonance because of the temperament. And that's where I think the section ends. And here's where we should return back to the original tempo. So now if we continue, we get a couple of chords. And then we get a section where 4 chords keep being repeated over and over and over again. The next thing that we have is a move towards the cadence. We want to conclude the section. So after this, we're here, and Couperin really should move to F major. And technically speaking, what could happen at this point is this. And that's the end. But this is not what happens, because at that moment where I played Couperin actually uses an F minor chord, so that the effect is this. I'm going back a measure so you can hear it, you can appreciate more the effect here. We get this. This is because, of course, in F minor, where he goes, we need an A flat, but as I've said before, with quarter comma mean tone, we don't have enharmonic. So these notes are all one thing, but not their enharmonic equivalent. And this note is only a G sharp. And the interesting thing about this, of course, is that he doesn't really have to go to F minor here. There is absolutely no reason, but he does it because we get this. we get this final sting before we move to an idea of F major and then conclude the actual section in C major. There's no reason for him to use this F minor, but he uses it for this final sting. And here's where I also think sometimes I hear musicians, they say, well, you know, A flat doesn't exist in quarter comma mean tone, so if the composer is asking for an A flat, well, just retune the G sharp. And I think that is totally wrong. The expression of this piece depends precisely on this idea. Couperin is asking here for a note that doesn't really exist in this temperament. And this is what lends this section and this piece this wonderfully poignant expression, which of course is part of the subject matter, right? This is a tombeau for someone who died. And this is the moment where he falls down the stairs, and suddenly is where we start getting all of these jarring harmonies precisely because of the temperament. If you retune the G sharp to an A flat, or even worse, if you use something like equal temperament, all of this is completely lost. So I would say some of the most important aspects of this piece's expressive content have to do with the way Louis Couperin is using quarter comma mean tone. He knows when to go to those, shall we say, forbidden areas of the temperament to heighten the expression. And as you listen to the entire performance, you will notice that he does this in other parts of the piece, but only selectively. In other words, this, to me at least, is perfectly planned and almost perfectly spaced out. He knows when to introduce these for heightened expression, for the best kind of effect. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the performance.